My family tried to steal my inheritance because I'm single. What they did next left me homeless. I never thought my own family would betray me like this. Blood is supposed to be thicker than water, right? That's what I always believed until 3 months ago when my parents and brother tried to steal what was rightfully mine. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Alex, and until recently, I was living in the house my grandfather left me in his will. It was a beautiful 3-bedroom colonial in a quiet neighborhood where property values had been steadily climbing for years. The house wasn't just a place to live, it was a connection to my grandfather, who had practically raised me during my teenage years. The inheritance that changed everything. When my grandfather passed away last year, I was devastated. We had been incredibly close, spending weekends fishing at the lake behind his property and evenings on the porch talking about life. He was more like a father to me than my own dad ever was. At the reading of his will, everyone was surprised, except maybe me, when the lawyer announced that Grandpa had left his house to me specifically. The property was worth nearly 650 buon, and I could see the shock on my parents' faces when they heard the news. To my grandson, Alex, the lawyer read, I leave my home and the surrounding property. He has always appreciated this place and its history, and I know he will care for it as I have. My brother Mark's jaw physically dropped. My mother's eyes narrowed to slits. Dad just sat there, completely still, his knuckles white as he gripped the armrests of his chair. That should have been my first warning. The first signs of trouble. For the first few months after inheriting the house, everything seemed fine on the surface. I moved in, started making minor renovations, and settled into a comfortable routine. I was 31, single, and enjoying my independence in a house that felt like home, in ways my apartments never had. Then came the casual comments during family dinners. Such a big house for just one person, Mom would say, spooning extra mashed potatoes onto Mark's plate while his wife Susan nodded in agreement. You know, when your grandfather built this house, he intended it for a family, Dad would add, not making eye contact. I brushed these comments off at first. After all, I'd been hearing variations of, when are you going to settle down since my mid-20s? Being the single sibling in your 30s means becoming very familiar with family members' not-so-subtle hints about your relationship status. But then, the comments grew more frequent, more pointed. Mark and Susan are thinking about having a second child, Mom mentioned one Sunday afternoon. They really could use the extra space. Their apartment is getting cramped, with little Emily's toys everywhere. I laughed it off. Well, they should start house hunting then. The market in their area is pretty good right now. The silence that followed was deafening. 4 pairs of eyes stared at me as if I'd suggested something completely unreasonable. The intervention. Things came to a head about 3 months ago. I received a text from my mother asking me to come over for dinner that weekend. Family meeting, she called it. Important matters to discuss. I showed up with a bottle of wine, expecting perhaps news about Dad's retirement or some other family announcement. Instead, I walked into what can only be described as an ambush. My parents, Mark, Susan, and even my father's brother, Uncle Pete, were sitting in the living room waiting for me. The atmosphere was tense, like walking into a courtroom where you're already presumed guilty. Alex, we need to talk about Grandpa's house, Dad began without preamble. Mom jumped in before I could respond. We've been thinking, and it really doesn't make sense for you to have that big house all to yourself when Mark and Susan are starting their family. They need the space. I blinked, stunned by the directness of it. Excuse me? Mark cleared his throat. Look, Alex, it's not personal, but I have a family to think about. Emily needs a backyard to play in, and with the new baby coming— New baby? I interrupted. You're having another child? Susan placed a protective hand over her still flat stomach. We just found out, 10 weeks along. Under normal circumstances, I would have been congratulating them. But this didn't feel like a pregnancy announcement. It felt like ammunition in an argument I didn't realize we were having. "That's great news," I said carefully, "but I don't see what that has to do with my house." Uncle Pete leaned forward, his voice taking on that patronizing tone he'd used since I was a kid. "Alex, you have to understand. Your grandfather would have wanted his house to be filled with children, with family, not just—" He waved his hand dismissively. "One person living there alone." "That's not what his will said," I pointed out, feeling anger beginning to bubble up inside me. "The will was a mistake," Mom said firmly. "Your grandfather was getting confused toward the end. He didn't realize what he was doing." This was news to me. Grandpa had been sharp as a tack right up until the heart attack that took him. He'd beaten me at chess just 2 days before he died. "That's not true," I said, my voice hardening. "And even if it were, the will is legal and binding. The house is mine." Dad stood up then, his face flushing red the way it always did when he was about to lose his temper. "This isn't about legalities, Alex. This is about doing what's right for the family. You're being selfish. What do you need all that space for? You don't have a family. You don't even have a girlfriend." The room fell silent. The words hung in the air, stinging like a slap. "So that's what this is about?" I said quietly. "Because I'm single, I don't deserve the house." "That's not what your father meant," Mom began, but Mark cut her off. "Look, Alex, be reasonable. Susan and I are starting a family. We need stability, space. You could sell the house to us at below market value. We'd give you a fair price, and you could get a nice condo downtown. You always said you liked the city better anyway." I stood up, unable to believe what I was hearing. "So you want me to sell you a $650,000 house at a discount because—" "What? Because you decided to have children and I haven't?" "Because it's what Grandpa would have wanted," Mom insisted. "If that's what he wanted, he would have put it in the will," I shot back. "But he didn't. He left the house to me, specifically to me. Not to Mark, not to both of us, not to you and Dad. To me." The conversation deteriorated from there. Voices were raised, old grievances were aired. By the time I left, I was shaking with anger and disbelief. The people who were supposed to love me unconditionally were suggesting I didn't deserve my inheritance because I didn't fit their idea of what a proper adult life should look like. I drove home that night with a knot in my stomach, replaying the conversation over and over. Was I being selfish? Was I somehow less deserving of the house because I didn't have a spouse or children? No, I decided. Absolutely not. The house was mine, legally and rightfully. End of discussion. Little did I know, my family had no intention of accepting that answer. The escalation. For the next few weeks, things were tense. My parents called repeatedly, leaving voicemails that ranged from guilt-tripping to outright manipulative. Mark texted me articles about housing prices in my area and links to condos for sale downtown. I started avoiding family gatherings. When I couldn't, I kept conversations brief and impersonal. The divide between us grew wider, but I remained firm in my position. The house was mine, and I wasn't going to be pressured into giving it up. Then came the letter from a lawyer, not my grandfather's lawyer, but one I didn't recognize. It stated that there were questions regarding the validity of Herbert Reynolds's last will and testament, and that my parents were contesting the will on the grounds that my grandfather had been unduly influenced during its creation. I called my grandfather's lawyer immediately, my hands shaking with disbelief. "They're claiming I manipulated Grandpa?" I asked, my voice cracking. "That's absurd." "It's a stretch," he agreed, "but technically they have the right to contest. We'll need to appear in court. I have to warn you, Alex, these cases can get ugly. They often involve detailed examinations of family relationships, accusations of manipulation, character witnesses. It can be quite invasive. I felt sick. Not only were my parents trying to take my house, but they were willing to drag my relationship with my grandfather through the mud to do it. "How long will this take?" I asked. "Months, potentially, and it won't be cheap. My firm will represent you, of course, but you should be prepared for significant legal fees." Legal fees I could barely afford. While I had a decent job as a graphic designer, most of my savings had gone into renovations for the house. The thought of draining what little I had left on a legal battle against my own family made me physically ill. But I couldn't just give up. This was my home, my inheritance, my connection to the person who had always believed in me. I resolved to fight. The dirty tactics. What I wasn't prepared for was just how low my family would stoop. The first sign came when my neighbors started treating me differently. Mrs. Peterson, who had always waved cheerfully from her garden, now hurried inside when she saw me coming. The Johnsons, who had been bringing me cookies since I moved in, suddenly stopped inviting me to their barbecues. I found out why when Mr. Farley, the one neighbor who still spoke to me, came over one evening. "I thought you should know," he said uncomfortably. "Your brother has been telling people around the neighborhood that you manipulated your grandfather into changing his will. He's saying you isolated him from the family in his final months, that you took advantage of his declining health." I was stunned. "That's completely untrue." "I know that," Mr. Farley said, patting my arm. "I saw how you were with your grandfather. But not everyone knew him, or you, as well as I did." The neighborhood gossip was just the beginning. Soon, family friends started reaching out, urging me to do the right thing and think about what's best for the family. I received emails from distant relatives I barely knew, expressing their disappointment in my selfish behavior. Mark and Susan started bringing Emily to play in my backyard without permission, as if staking their claim. When I confronted them, Mark simply said, "Emily loves it here. You wouldn't deny your niece a place to play, would you?" It was emotional manipulation, plain and simple, and it infuriated me. But the worst was yet to come. The breaking point, about 6 weeks after the family meeting, I came home from work to find a notice taped to my front door. It was from the county, informing me that a lien had been placed on the property due to unpaid property taxes. This was impossible. I had paid the taxes myself, on time, with money from my own account. I spent hours on the phone with the county tax office, trying to sort out the confusion. Eventually, I discovered what had happened. My father, who had helped my grandfather with his finances in the past, had accessed my grandfather's old bank account and reversed the tax payment, claiming it had been made in error. The county had sent notices to my grandfather's old address, my parents' house, which they had conveniently forgotten to forward to me. By the time I received the notice on my door, the situation had escalated to a lien. I was able to resolve it by showing proof of the original payment and repaying the taxes, plus late fees. But the incident left me shaken. My parents were willing to potentially damage my credit and financial standing to pressure me into giving up the house. That night, I finally broke down and called my best friend, Jamie, who lived in another state. I hadn't told anyone about the situation, partly out of embarrassment and partly because I couldn't believe it was really happening. "They're trying to take my house, Jamie," I sobbed into the phone. "My own family. They think because I'm single, I don't deserve it." Jamie was horrified. "That's insane. Have you spoken to a lawyer?" "Grandfather's lawyer is handling the will contest, but he warned me it could take months and cost thousands. I don't know if I can afford it." "What about a restraining order? They're harassing you." "I hadn't thought of that. Maybe. I never thought they'd go this far. Over a house." "It's not just about the house," Jamie said wisely. "It's about entitlement. They think Mark deserves more because he's following the traditional path. Marriage, kids, it's discriminatory, is what it is." Jamie was right. This wasn't just about property. It was about my worth as a person being tied to my marital status and reproductive choices. "Stay with me for a while," Jamie offered. "Get away from all this toxicity. I have a spare room." The offer was tempting, but I shook my head, even though Jamie couldn't see me. If I leave, they win. I'm not abandoning my home. Little did I know how prophetic Jamie's suggestion would become. The ambush. 3 days later, I returned home from grocery shopping to find a locksmith changing the locks on my front door. My parents' car was in the driveway, and I could see Mark carrying boxes into my house. I slammed on the brakes and jumped out of my car. Grocery bags forgotten. "What the hell is going on here?" The locksmith looked startled. My father stepped out onto the porch, his expression grim but determined. "Alex, we need to talk." "Talk? You're breaking into my house and you want to talk?" I was shouting now, not caring who heard. "This is illegal. You can't just change the locks on someone else's property." "Actually," my father said, pulling a document from his pocket, "we can. This is an emergency court order granting us temporary access to the property while the will contest proceeds." He handed me the paper. It looked official, with a judge's signature and a case number. According to the document, there was reasonable suspicion that I might damage or dispose of contested property, and therefore my parents were being granted temporary access to secure family heirlooms and documents relevant to the case. "This is bullshit," I said, my hands trembling as I read. "There's no reason to think I would damage anything." "The judge disagreed," Dad said simply. "We're just following the court's orders." I watched in helpless rage as Mark carried another box out of my house, and loaded it into his SUV. "Those are my things," I protested. "They're family heirlooms," Mark corrected. "Items that belong to Grandpa that need to be preserved until the case is resolved." I tried to push past my father to enter the house, but he blocked my way. "I wouldn't do that, Alex. The order specifies that only we can access certain rooms while we catalog the items. If you interfere, you could be held in contempt of court." "This is my house!" I was nearly screaming now. "You can't lock me out of my own house. It's a contested property," Dad said coldly. "And until the court decides otherwise, we have the right to secure family possessions." I pulled out my phone. "I'm calling the police." "Go ahead," Mark said, coming up beside Dad. "We'll show them the court order. You'll be the one in trouble, not us." I was trapped. Without a lawyer present to verify the document, I had no way of knowing if what they were saying was true. And if it was, calling the police might indeed backfire on me. "Fine," I said, my voice shaking with fury. "Take whatever family heirlooms you want, but I'm going inside my house now." Dad hesitated, then stepped aside. "The master bedroom and office are off limits per the court order. We've sealed them until the hearing." I walked in to find my home in chaos. Boxes everywhere, drawers pulled open, items strewn across counters. My mother was in the living room, carefully wrapping Grandpa's old clock in bubble wrap. "What gives you the right?" I asked her, my voice breaking. "How can you do this to your own child?" She didn't meet my eyes. "We're doing what's best for the family." "I am your family!" I shouted. "Or have you forgotten that?" She flinched, but continued wrapping the clock. I made my way through the house, documenting the invasion with photos on my phone. When I tried to enter the master bedroom, I found the door literally sealed with some kind of official-looking tape. It was surreal, nightmarish. My own family had effectively orchestrated a legal home invasion. When they finally left 3 hours later, they took with them nearly every item of value or sentimental importance in the house. Grandpa's antique desk, the grandfather clock, photo albums, even my grandmother's china that Grandpa had specifically mentioned he wanted me to have. And they took the new house keys. The locksmith had changed every lock, and my father pointedly pocketed the keys as they left. "We'll return tomorrow to continue cataloging items," he informed me coldly. The court order allows us access between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. daily until the inventory is complete. After they drove away, I collapsed on the front step, too shocked and devastated to even cry. How had things escalated to this point? How could my own family do this to me? I called Grandpa's lawyer again, my voice shaking as I explained what had happened. "This doesn't sound right," he said, concerned. "Emergency orders like this are rare in will contests. Can you send me a photo of the document?" I did, and he promised to look into it immediately. An hour later, he called back, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Alex, this order is highly irregular. I've called the court, and while there is a case number associated with your grandfather's will contest, this specific order doesn't appear in the electronic filing system. I need to see the original document and verify the judge's signature." "What are you saying?" I asked, though I already feared the answer. "I'm saying there's a possibility this document isn't legitimate. Don't confront your family about this. If there's been fraud committed, we need to handle this very carefully. For now, document everything. Take photos of all missing items, the sealed rooms, everything." I felt a glimmer of hope. If my family had fabricated a court document, they were the ones breaking the law, not me. But that hope was short-lived, locked out and hopeless. The next morning I woke early, determined to be prepared when my family arrived to continue their cataloging. I had spent the night on the couch, unable to access my own bedroom due to the seals on the door. I made coffee and waited, and waited. By 10 a.m., when they still hadn't arrived, I began to worry. Had something changed? Had my lawyer's inquiries spooked them? I tried calling my father. No answer. Same with my mother and Mark. All three of them were suddenly unreachable. Around noon, my lawyer called. "Alex, I've got some disturbing news. I spoke with the judge whose name is on that order. She confirms she never signed any such document in your grandfather's case. This was a fraudulent order, possibly created by digitally altering a legitimate document from another case." Relief flooded through me. So they had no right to take anything. That's breaking and entering. Theft. Exactly. I've already filed an emergency motion with the court and contacted the police. Given the family connection, they want you to come to the station to file a formal report. I was just about to leave for the police station when a van pulled up in front of my house. Two men in work clothes got out and approached my front door. "Can I help you?" I asked, stepping onto the porch. "We're here for the eviction," one of them said, consulting a clipboard. "Are you the current occupant?" "Eviction?" I repeated, my stomach dropping. "There must be a mistake. This is my house." The man handed me a document. "Court order, signed yesterday. The property's ownership is under dispute, and the plaintiffs have posted bond for temporary possession pending trial." I snatched the paper from him, scanning it frantically. There it was in black and white. My parents had somehow convinced a judge to grant them temporary possession of the house while the will contest proceeded, provided they posted a substantial bond. "This can't be right," I said, my voice rising. "I just spoke to my lawyer. The other document was fraudulent." The workers exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Look, we're just doing our job," the first man said. "If you have a legal objection, you need to take it up with the court. But according to this, we're authorized to change the locks and secure the property for the plaintiffs." "But I live here," I protested, feeling panic rising in my throat. "This is my home. Where am I supposed to go?" "I'm sorry," the second worker said, seeming genuinely sympathetic. "But we have to follow the court order. You're allowed to take personal effects, clothing, toiletries, that sort of thing, but the property needs to be vacated today." I stood there in shock, the paper trembling in my hands. This couldn't be happening. First the fake court order to steal my belongings, and now a real one to steal my home? I called my lawyer immediately. He was as shocked as I was. "This is highly unusual," he said, reading the document details I provided. "The judge must have been presented with some compelling evidence. I need to get to the courthouse immediately to see the full filing." "What do I do in the meantime?" I asked desperately. "They're changing the locks now. I'll be homeless by dinner." "Pack essentials for a few days," he advised. "We'll challenge this immediately, but court procedures take time. Do you have somewhere you can stay?" Jamie's offer to stay with her flashed through my mind, but she lived 3 states away. I had friends locally, but asking to crash on someone's couch indefinitely while fighting a legal battle seemed like a lot to ask. "I'll figure something out," I said numbly. 2 hours later, I stood on the sidewalk outside what used to be my home, watching as the workers finished installing the new locks. They had allowed me to pack 2 suitcases of personal belongings, but everything else, my furniture, kitchen items, electronics, books, remained locked inside. My lawyer had confirmed the eviction order was legitimate, though he was baffled by how quickly it had been granted. Apparently, my parents had submitted affidavits claiming I was damaging family heirlooms and threatening to sell the property, both complete fabrications, and had managed to get an emergency hearing with a judge who didn't know the full context. "We'll get this reversed," my lawyer promised, "but it might take a few days, possibly weeks. The court system moves slowly." I checked into a hotel that night, still in a state of shock. How had my life unraveled so completely in just a few short weeks? How had my own family justified stealing my home out from under me? The answer was painfully clear. Because I was single. Because I didn't have a real family of my own. Because in their eyes, my brother's nuclear family was more deserving than me, their unmarried, childless son. Rock bottom. The next few days were a blur of legal meetings, desperate phone calls, and sleepless nights in an increasingly expensive hotel room. My lawyer filed motions to reverse the eviction and to request sanctions against my parents for the fraudulent document. But court dates were weeks away. My credit card was approaching its limit. I still had to go to work each day, trying to focus on design projects while my personal life crumbled around me. I couldn't afford to keep staying at the hotel, but I had nowhere else to go. Pride kept me from reaching out to friends at first. I was embarrassed, ashamed that my own family had done this to me, that I had somehow failed to prevent it. But as my financial situation grew more desperate, I finally swallowed my pride and called Ryan, a college friend who lived about 30 minutes away. "Of course you can stay with us," he said immediately after I explained the situation. "Jen and I have that finished basement with the pull-out couch. Stay as long as you need." The relief I felt was immense, though tinged with humiliation. At 31, I was effectively homeless, relying on friends' charity while fighting my own family for what was rightfully mine. Moving into Ryan and Jen's basement felt like admitting defeat somehow. They were wonderful, giving me space when I needed it, including me in meals, never making me feel like a burden. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I had failed, that my family had won. Meanwhile, the legal battle intensified. My parents' lawyer filed motion after motion, each one designed to delay proceedings and drain my resources. They knew exactly what they were doing. The longer I was out of the house, the more desperate I would become, the more likely I would be to settle. And settling was exactly what they wanted. 3 weeks after the eviction, I received a formal offer from their lawyer. If I agreed to sell the house, they would drop all claims and split the proceeds with me, 60-40 in my favor. It was insulting. Not only were they trying to force me to sell my home, but they wanted a cut of the proceeds for their trouble. "Absolutely not," I told my lawyer. "I'm not selling." But as the weeks turned into a month, then 2, my resolve began to weaken. Legal fees were mounting. Living in someone else's basement, no matter how welcoming, was taking its toll on my mental health. My work was suffering. I'd already lost one client due to missed deadlines. Then came the final blow. The illegal sale. My lawyer called on a Tuesday morning, his voice grave. "Alex, I need you to sit down." Something in his tone made my stomach drop. "What's happened?" "I've just been informed. Your parents have listed the house for sale." "They what?" I nearly shouted. "They can't do that. The ownership is contested. There's a court case pending." "I know," he said grimly. "It's completely illegal. They have no right to sell the property. But they've listed it with a real estate agent for $700,000, marketed as a quick sale opportunity." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Stop them! Get an injunction or something." "I'm filing for one immediately," he assured me. "But I needed to tell you because, well, there's a complication." "What kind of complication?" He hesitated. "The listing has already received an offer, above asking price, and the buyers want to close quickly." My head was spinning. "But they can't sell it. They don't own it." "They're claiming they do, based on the temporary possession order and an obscure clause in your grandfather's original will from 20 years ago, before the updated version that left you the house. It's a legal stretch, but it could create enough confusion to push through a sale before the court stops them." "And then what happens?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Then we're fighting an even more complicated battle, trying to unwind a sale to innocent third-party buyers who may have no idea about the disputed ownership." I felt like I couldn't breathe. This was beyond underhanded, beyond cruel. My family was willing to commit fraud, to potentially involve innocent people in their scheme, all to prevent me from having the house my grandfather wanted me to have. "What do we do?" I asked, feeling more helpless than ever. "I'm filing for the injunction now. We need to get the word out, too. Contact the real estate agent, inform them of the disputed ownership. I'll reach out to the title company to flag the property. We need to move fast." Move fast we did. By the end of the day, my lawyer had filed for an emergency injunction and had personally called the real estate agent to inform them of the situation. I had emailed the agent documentation proving I was the legal heir to the property, and warning of potential legal consequences for facilitating a fraudulent sale. The agent withdrew the listing the next day, but the damage was done. My parents had shown just how far they were willing to go, and the stress of the situation was taking a severe toll on me. I was losing weight, barely sleeping, jumping every time my phone rang, expecting more bad news. Ryan and Jen were supportive, but I could tell my presence in their home was creating strain. They had a life, routines, private time, all disrupted by having a semi-permanent house guest camped in their basement. Something had to give. I couldn't continue like this. The turning point. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Susan, my brother's wife, showed up at Ryan and Jen's one evening. She looked uncomfortable, nervous even, as she asked if we could talk privately. Wary but curious, I agreed. We walked to a nearby park, sitting on a bench by the duck pond. "I can't be part of this anymore," she said without preamble. "What your parents and Mark are doing, it's wrong. It's cruel." I stared at her, not daring to hope. "Why are you telling me this now?" She looked down at her hands. "I've been trying to convince Mark to stop for weeks, but he's so fixated on this house, on what he thinks he deserves. When they listed it for sale, I knew they'd gone too far." "But you're pregnant," I said. "Don't you want the house for your growing family?" Susan shook her head. "Not like this. Not by taking it from you. That house is yours, Alex. Your grandfather wanted you to have it." She reached into her purse and pulled out a sealed envelope. "Your grandfather gave this to Mark about a month before he died. Mark never showed it to your parents. I found it when I was cleaning his desk drawer." I took the envelope with trembling hands. My name was written on the front in my grandfather's shaky handwriting. "He hasn't read it," Susan assured me. He doesn't know I found it, but I thought maybe it could help. I tore it open, unfolding a single sheet of paper covered in my grandfather's distinctive script. Dear Alex, if you're reading this, I'm no longer here, and you've inherited the house as I intended. I want to explain why I chose you, not because I need to justify my decision, but because I want you to understand its importance. This house has always been a safe haven for those who needed it most. When I built it, your grandmother and I had just lost our first child. This place was our healing, our fresh start. When your mother was a teenager and struggling, this house gave her stability. And when you came to live with us during your difficult high school years, it became your sanctuary too. I've watched you grow into a thoughtful, independent person who values this home not for its market value, but for the memories it holds. Mark has always been focused on achievements, on status. He's a good man, but he sees the house as an asset, not a home. I fear that after I'm gone, there may be pressure on you to give up the house. Family can be complicated. Remember that your worth isn't measured by whether you've followed traditional paths. Your life has value exactly as you choose to live it, with or without a partner, with or without children. The house is yours. If someday you decide to sell it, that will be your choice. But don't let anyone convince you that you deserve it less, because your family looks different from theirs. All my love, Grandpa, tears streamed down my face as I read his words. It was like hearing his voice again, reassuring me that I wasn't wrong, that I wasn't selfish for wanting to keep my home. There's more, Susan said quietly. Mark found your grandfather's lawyer's notes in the office when they took over the house. Notes from their meetings about the will. It's clear your grandfather was completely lucid when he made his decision. The will contest has no merit. So why are they continuing with it? I asked, wiping my eyes. Because they thought they could wear you down, she admitted. Your mom was convinced you'd give in eventually rather than fight family. And your dad, he's always resented that his father left you the house instead of him. She reached out hesitantly, touching my arm. I'm sorry, Alex, for my part in this, for not speaking up sooner. I sat there, letter in hand, trying to process everything. Susan's revelation wasn't just about confirming what I already knew, that my grandfather wanted me to have the house. It was about understanding the deeper dynamics at play, the resentments and expectations that had led my family to such extreme actions. What happens now? I asked. I've told Mark I'm taking Emily and moving to my sister's if he doesn't stop this madness, Susan said firmly. I showed him the letter. He's not happy. But I think he's beginning to see how wrong this all is. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. Justice at last, 2 days later, my lawyer called with news. The judge had not only granted our injunction stopping any potential sale of the house, but had also ordered an emergency hearing about the eviction order. Your sister-in-law's testimony was crucial, he explained. She signed an affidavit confirming that your parents knowingly made false statements to obtain the eviction order. The judge was not pleased. The hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday. I barely slept the night before, alternating between hope that this nightmare might finally end and fear that somehow some new disaster would strike. When I arrived at the courthouse, Susan was there, looking nervous but determined. Mark was conspicuously absent, as were my parents initially. They arrived just minutes before the hearing began, refusing to make eye contact with me as they took seats on the opposite side of the courtroom. The judge, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, wasted no time getting to the point. I've reviewed the filings in this case, she began, and I have serious concerns about the conduct of the plaintiffs. This court does not look kindly on fraudulent representations or abuse of emergency procedures. My father's attorney tried to interject, but the judge held up a hand to silence him. Before we proceed, I want to address the eviction order that was granted by Judge Michaels. Based on new evidence, it appears that order was obtained under false pretenses. She looked directly at my parents, her disapproval evident. Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds, your affidavits claimed that your son was damaging family heirlooms and threatening to sell the property. Do you stand by those statements? My father cleared his throat. Your Honor, we genuinely believed— That wasn't my question, the judge interrupted. Do you have any evidence that your son damaged property or threatened to sell the house? Tense silence filled the courtroom. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice barely audible. No, Your Honor. I see. The judge's tone was icy. And are you aware that knowingly making false statements in an affidavit constitutes perjury? My father paled visibly. Their lawyer jumped in quickly. Your Honor, my clients believed they were acting in the best interests of preserving family property during a legitimate will contest. A will contest that appears to have equally dubious merit, the judge countered, rifling through papers on her desk. I have before me notes from Herbert Reynolds's attorney confirming multiple discussions about his intent to leave the property to his grandson, stretching back over 2 years. I also have medical records indicating he was of sound mind until his death. She looked up, fixing my parents with a stern gaze. Given these circumstances, I am vacating the eviction order immediately. Mr. Reynolds, she nodded to me, you are to be restored to your residence today. Court officers will accompany you to ensure compliance. I nearly cried with relief. As for the will contest, she continued, I am dismissing it with prejudice. The evidence clearly supports the validity of Herbert Reynolds's final will and testament. My father stood up abruptly. This is outrageous. That house belongs in our family. It is in your family, the judge responded coolly, with your son, who, I might add, you have treated abominably. Sit down, Mr. Reynolds. He sat, his face flushed with anger. Given the serious nature of the misrepresentations made to this court, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal charges. I am also awarding reasonable attorney's fees to the defendant. She turned to me. Mr. Reynolds, you are free to pursue civil action for damages related to your wrongful eviction and any property removed from your home. This court would look favorably on such claims. With a final bang of her gavel, it was over. 3 months of nightmare, resolved in a 20-minute hearing. Outside the courtroom, my lawyer was jubilant. This is the best possible outcome. We'll have you back in your house today. And if you want to pursue damages— But I was barely listening. Across the hallway, Susan stood alone, having separated herself from my parents. Excuse me, I said to my lawyer, and walked over to her. Thank you, I said simply. Without your help, this might have gone very differently. Susan smiled sadly. It was the right thing to do. I just wish— She trailed off, glancing toward my parents, who were huddled with their lawyer, looking shell-shocked. What happens now, with you and Mark? I asked. I don't know, she admitted. He's angry I betrayed him, but I couldn't let them keep doing this to you. It wasn't right. I nodded, unsure what to say. Despite everything, she was still my sister-in-law, still carrying my future niece or nephew. Whatever happens between you two, I said finally, you're still family to me. You and Emily. That doesn't change. Tears welled in her eyes. That means a lot. That afternoon, accompanied by 2 court officers, I returned to my home for the first time in over 2 months. The locks were changed again, this time with keys handed directly to me. Inside, I found the house partially emptied. Many of my grandfather's possessions were still missing, presumably at my parents' house. We'll get those back, my lawyer assured me. We can file for a specific performance order compelling them to return everything. But standing in my grandfather's, my, living room, I felt strangely detached from the missing objects. They were just things. Important things, yes, with sentimental value, but still just things. What mattered more was that I had my home back, that justice, however delayed, had prevailed, that my grandfather's wishes had been honored. The aftermath. The weeks that followed were a time of healing and rebuilding. Most of my grandfather's possessions were eventually returned, delivered by movers hired by my parents' lawyer with no personal contact. My relationship with my family was shattered, possibly beyond repair. My parents made no attempt to contact me directly, though their lawyer reached out about dropping potential criminal charges in exchange for a family reconciliation. I declined. Some betrayals cut too deep. Mark and Susan separated briefly but ultimately reconciled. She brought Emily to visit one Sunday afternoon, an awkward but hopeful first step toward some kind of new normal. He wanted to come, she said of Mark, but wasn't sure he'd be welcome. I'm not ready for that, I admitted. Not yet. She nodded, understanding. It will take time. For all of us. As for me, the experience changed me in profound ways. The betrayal by my family forced me to reevaluate what family truly meant, to build stronger connections with friends who had stood by me during my darkest moments. Ryan and Jen remained close allies, regular dinner guests in my reclaimed home. Jamie finally came to visit from out of state, bringing her girlfriend for a week-long stay. My home became what my grandfather had always intended, a gathering place for loved ones, chosen family. 6 months after regaining my house, I received an unexpected letter from my father. It was brief, unapologetic, but revealed volumes in its subtext. Alex, your mother and I are moving to Arizona next month. We've purchased a retirement property there. We've always wanted to live somewhere warmer. I've enclosed a key to our storage unit. Your grandfather's desk and some other items are there. Take them or don't. It's your choice. Dad, no apology. No acknowledgement of the pain they'd caused. Just practical information and a subtle admission that they were moving on, literally and figuratively. I gave the storage unit key to my lawyer and asked him to handle retrieving the items. I couldn't face going myself. Couldn't risk the emotional upheaval of seeing more of my grandfather's possessions treated as bargaining chips. The desk, when it arrived, contained one final surprise: a hidden compartment with a small box inside. Within it was my grandmother's engagement ring and a note from my grandfather. For when you find someone to share your life with, whoever they may be, love isn't measured by convention. Tears filled my eyes as I held the delicate ring. My grandfather had known me so well, had accepted me completely. He hadn't left me the house because he expected me to eventually conform to traditional family structures. He had left it to me because he believed in my right to define family on my own terms. 1 year later, on the anniversary of regaining my home, I hosted a house party. Friends, both old and new, filled the rooms with laughter and conversation. Susan came with Emily and the new baby, Daniel. Mark remained absent, still unable or unwilling to bridge the divide between us. My parents, now settled in Arizona, sent a brief email acknowledging the anniversary, but made no mention of visiting or reconciliation. As the evening wound to a close, I found myself sitting on the back porch with Jamie, the night air cool and fragrant with early autumn. "Do you ever think about selling?" she asked. "After everything that happened?" I looked out over the yard where my grandfather and I had spent countless hours gardening together, to the lake beyond where we'd fished and talked and bonded. "Sometimes," I admitted, "the house holds difficult memories now, along with the good ones. But it's mine, my home, my choice." I smiled, feeling a sense of peace that had been hard-won. That's what Grandpa wanted for me, the freedom to choose my own path, to define family in my own way. Jamie raised her glass. "Two choices, and to family. The kind we're born into, and the kind we build ourselves." I clinked my glass against hers, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks over my home. My inheritance, my choice. My own parents had tried to steal my house because I was single, because they believed I didn't deserve it without a real family. What they failed to understand was that family isn't defined by marriage certificates or children. It's defined by love, respect, and acceptance. In trying to take my home, they had inadvertently helped me build something far more valuable, a clear understanding of my own worth, independent of traditional expectations, and a chosen family built on mutual respect rather than obligation. As I looked around at the people who had supported me through the darkest period of my life, I realized that I wasn't just the owner of a house. I was the creator of a home, one filled with love, acceptance, and belonging. And that was an inheritance no one could ever take away from me. Epilogue. 2 years after regaining my house, I met someone. Jordan was kind, creative, and completely unconcerned with conventional relationship timelines. We took things slowly, building a connection based on genuine compatibility rather than societal expectations. When Jordan eventually moved in with me, it wasn't because we felt pressured to progress our relationship on some predetermined schedule. It was because we wanted to share our lives, to build something meaningful together. My grandfather's ring remained in its box, not because I was waiting for some perfect moment prescribed by tradition, but because Jordan and I were writing our own story, creating our own traditions. The house that had once been at the center of such bitter conflict became a place of healing and new beginnings. We renovated the kitchen together, planted new trees in the backyard, and filled the space with evidence of our shared life. Susan continued to bring the children to visit occasionally. Mark finally came once, the meeting awkward but civil. My parents remained distant figures, connected only through brief emails and holiday cards. But the family I had built around me, friends who had become as close as siblings, colleagues who had supported me through the legal battle, neighbors who welcomed me back with open arms, that family grew stronger every day. As for me, I found an unexpected silver lining in the painful experience. The legal battle had connected me with a nonprofit organization that helped people facing housing discrimination and predatory practices. I began volunteering with them, using my story to help others fight for their homes, their rights, their dignity. One evening, as Jordan and I sat on the porch swing my grandfather had built, watching fireflies dance over the lawn, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. "What are you thinking about?" Jordan asked, noticing my smile. "About how sometimes the things meant to break us end up making us stronger instead," I replied. "About how my family tried to take this house because they thought I didn't deserve it, without fitting into their idea of what family should look like." I gestured toward the yard, where our friends were setting up tables for an impromptu dinner party. "And look what we've built instead." Jordan squeezed my hand. "A home. A real one." "Exactly," I said, leaning my head on their shoulder. "The kind that's built on love and choice, not obligation or convention." As we joined our friends under the string lights that twinkled like stars, I thought of my grandfather's words. "Your life has value exactly as you choose to live it." In trying to steal my inheritance because I was single, my family had inadvertently given me a different kind of inheritance altogether. The unshakable knowledge that I was enough, exactly as I was. That I had the right to define family, home, and belonging on my own terms. And that knowledge was worth more than any house could ever be.